For 5 years, Kristen Egan served the Luna of Blackridge Pack in perfect silence. She scrubbed floors until her hands bled. She endured burns from hot irons pressed against her skin. She felt the whip tear open her back more times than she could count. And through it all, she never made a sound, because making a sound meant dying faster. Vivienne Thorne, the Alpha's Luna, elegant and untouchable, was Kristen's personal nightmare. And her crime, being looked at. For 3 seconds, the Alpha's eyes had lingered on Kristen's face. 3 seconds that sealed 5 years of torture. But when Kristen finally raised her hands to protect herself during a beating, Vivienne saw her opportunity. She staged an assault, had Kristen arrested, and condemned her to execution under pack law. No trial, no defense, just death for a maid who dared fight back. Then Alpha Marvin Swindell returned from war and demanded to see the girl everyone said attacked his wife. What he found in that cell, years of scars carved into silent flesh, ignited something primal in him. Rage, protection, justice. And when he discovered his own wife was the monster, he lost control. This is the story of how one Alpha's blindness nearly cost an innocent life, and how the moment he finally saw the truth, the entire pack would never be the same. If you want to know what happens when an Alpha discovers his Luna is a monster hiding behind a crown, hit subscribe right now. Because this story goes places that will make your blood boil and your heart break before justice finally comes. Kristen's journey from silent victim to survivor. It's about to get intense. Don't miss a single word. Subscribe and let's dive in. Picture Blackridge Pack territory, vast forests and mountain ranges controlled by one of the most powerful Alpha families in the region. The Swindell Pack isn't just influential, they're legendary. Alpha Marvin Swindell commands respect through strength and strategy, his name whispered with equal parts reverence and fear. At the heart of his territory stands the Pack House, a sprawling estate where hierarchy determines everything. Alphas and high-ranking wolves live in luxury. Servants and omegas exist in the shadows, necessary but invisible. And somewhere between those worlds lives Kristen Egan, a maid who serves the Luna directly. On the surface, it's an honor. Serving the Luna means access to power, better quarters, more respect from other servants. But behind Vivienne Thorne's elegant smile and designer clothes lives something darker. She's beautiful, charming in public, the perfect picture of what a Luna should be. But in private, when no one is watching, she's something else entirely. Kristen learned this the hard way 5 years ago. She was 17 then, newly brought into the pack house to serve, grateful for the position, hopeful for a better life than the orphanage where she grew up. She kept her eyes down, did her work perfectly, never caused trouble, until the day Alpha Marvin glanced at her. It was nothing, a momentary look across the dining hall, his eyes registering her existence for maybe 3 seconds before moving on. He probably didn't even remember it. But Vivienne saw, and Vivienne never forgot. That night, the first burn appeared on Kristen's arm. A hot iron pressed against her skin while Vivienne smiled and asked, "Do you think you're pretty? Do you think my husband would want someone like you?" Kristen said nothing. She learned quickly that speaking only made it worse. So she became silent, enduring, invisible, surviving day by day, burn by burn, scar by scar, praying for either escape or death, whichever came first. But Kristen carries secrets Vivienne doesn't know. She's not human as everyone assumes. She's a shifter whose wolf has been blocked since childhood, trapped inside her mind since the night rogues murdered her parents in front of her. The trauma severed the connection, leaving her vulnerable, unable to shift, unable to access the strength that should be her birthright. And now, after 5 years of torture, after one moment of self-defense that Vivienne twisted into assault, Kristen sits in a cell waiting to die for crimes she didn't commit. Unless someone finally looks, unless someone finally sees, unless the Alpha who's been blind to the monster in his bed finally opens his eyes before it's too late. This is where our story begins, in that cell, with those scars, with time running out and truth desperate to be heard. The iron was still hot when Vivienne pressed it against Kristen's ribs. The smell of burning flesh filled the Luna's private chambers, a scent Kristen had learned to recognize over 5 years of service. She bit down on her tongue until she tasted blood, refusing to give Vivienne the satisfaction of hearing her scream. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Vivienne's voice was honey-sweet, the same tone she used in public when playing the perfect Luna. "Keeping your eyes down, staying silent, pretending to be invisible. But I see you, little mouse. I always see you." Kristen kept her gaze fixed on the expensive Persian rug beneath her knees, watching her own tears darken the intricate pattern. 5 years. 5 years of burns and whips and starvation. 5 years of torture for a crime she didn't commit, being looked at for 3 seconds by an alpha who didn't even remember her face. "My husband returns from the border wars tomorrow," Vivienne continued, setting the iron aside to examine her work. The burn was perfect, high enough to be hidden by Kristen's uniform, deep enough to scar. "Everything must be perfect for his return. And you, little mouse, you will make sure of it. Won't you?" "Yes, Luna." Kristen's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from years of swallowing screams. "Good girl." Vivienne's fingers tangled in Kristen's dark hair, yanking her head back to force eye contact. Her Luna's face was beautiful. Porcelain skin, emerald eyes, features that belonged in paintings. But Kristen had learned that beauty meant nothing. Monsters wore all kinds of faces. "Now get out of my sight. You have work to do." Kristen gathered her cleaning supplies with trembling hands, each movement carefully controlled to hide the agony radiating from her ribs. She'd learned to move through pain, to function while her body screamed. Survival meant endurance. Survival meant silence. The servant corridors were empty this time of night, most of the staff already in their quarters. Kristen made her way to the small storage closet she'd claimed as her own space, a place where she could tend her wounds in private, where no one would see her weakness. But Mabel was waiting outside the door. "Child," the older woman breathed, her weathered face creasing with concern. Mabel had been head maid once, before she'd witnessed too much and been forced into early retirement. She still lived on pack territory, still kept an eye on the younger servants when she could. "She hurt you again." "I'm fine." Kristen unlocked the closet, hoping Mabel wouldn't follow. She didn't. Mabel knew better than to push. "The alpha returns tomorrow," Mabel said quietly. "Maybe things will be different when he's home." Kristen said nothing. She'd learned that hope was more dangerous than despair. Hope made you believe in rescue, and rescue never came. Inside her closet, surrounded by cleaning supplies and the thin blanket she slept on, Kristen carefully cleaned the burn. She had a stash of stolen medical supplies, bandages, antiseptic, burn cream. Each injury added to the collection of scars covering her body, a roadmap of 5 years of systematic torture. She was 22 years old and already felt ancient. Something stirred inside her chest, a flutter of consciousness that wasn't quite her own. Her wolf. Trapped, blocked, silent since the night she'd watched rogues tear her parents apart when she was 10. The trauma had severed the connection, leaving her vulnerable, unable to shift, unable to access the strength that should be her birthright. Most people thought she was human. It was safer that way. Humans were servants, invisible, beneath notice. If anyone knew she was a shifter, even a broken one, questions would be asked. And questions led to discovery. Discovery led to Vivienne finding new ways to hurt her. Soon, her wolf whispered, the first word it had spoken in weeks. "Soon we'll be free." Kristen didn't believe it. Freedom was a fairy tale for people who hadn't learned that monsters ruled the world. The next morning came too quickly. Kristen worked through the pain, preparing the pack house for Alpha Marvin's return. Fresh flowers in every room, windows sparkling, floors polished until they reflected like mirrors. Everything perfect because anything less meant punishment. The Luna's quarters required special attention. Kristen moved through the familiar space with practiced efficiency, changing linens, organizing Vivienne's extensive wardrobe, placing fresh roses on the vanity. The room smelled of expensive perfume and cruelty. "You missed a spot." Kristen's heart lurched. She turned to find Vivienne in the doorway, already dressed for the Alpha's return in an emerald gown that matched her eyes. Beautiful, elegant, perfect. "I'll fix it immediately, Luna." "You certainly will." Vivienne moved closer, her heels clicking against the hardwood. "Actually, I have a better idea. Come here." Every instinct screamed at Kristen to run, but there was nowhere to run. nowhere to hide. She approached slowly, keeping her eyes down, waiting for whatever came next. Vivienne's hand shot out, grabbing Kristen's wrist with surprising strength. "You're getting too comfortable, too confident. I think you need a reminder of your place." She dragged Kristen toward the ornate fireplace where a poker rested against the stone. The end glowed red-hot, waiting. "Please," Kristen whispered, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Please, Luna, the alpha returns today. I need to work. You'll work when I say you can work." Vivienne reached for the poker. Something inside Kristen snapped. 5 years of torture, 5 years of silence, 5 years of dying by inches. It all crystallized into one moment of clarity. If Vivienne burned her again, she might not be able to work. And if she couldn't work, Vivienne would have her beaten for incompetence. And if she was beaten again so soon after last night's burn, Kristen's hands came up. Defensive, protective, blocking. The poker player never made contact. But Vivienne's eyes widened with opportunity. "You dare," the Luna breathed. "You dare raise your hands to me." "No, I was just—" Kristen started, but Vivienne was already moving. The Luna swung the poker, deliberately missing Kristen but connecting with a decorative vase. It shattered spectacularly. Then Vivienne raked her own nails across her face, leaving angry red marks. She tore her dress at the shoulder, messed her perfect hair, and finally, most damning of all, she screamed. "Guards, help! She's attacking me." The door burst open. 3 pack guards flooded in, taking in the scene. Their Luna disheveled and bleeding, a servant standing over broken glass with her hands still raised. "She tried to kill me," Vivienne sobbed, suddenly fragile and terrified. "I caught her stealing and she attacked me. She's insane. She needs to be put down before she hurts someone else." "No," Kristen breathed. "No, I didn't." "Arrest her," Vivienne commanded. "Lock her up. Alpha Marvin will deal with her when he returns. The punishment for assaulting the Luna is death." Strong hands grabbed Kristen's arms. She didn't fight. Fighting would only make it worse. As the guards dragged her from the room, she caught Vivienne's eyes and saw the truth there. This wasn't improvisation. This was planned. Vivienne had been waiting for an opportunity, any excuse to end this permanently. The cells beneath the pack house were dark and damp, smelling of mold and despair. They threw Kristen into the farthest one, slamming the iron door shut with a finality that echoed through the stone corridors. "You'll hang at dawn," one guard said, almost apologetic. "Alpha's orders for anyone who harms the Luna. Nothing personal, girl, just pack law." Then they were gone, and Kristen was alone with the darkness and the certainty of death. She slid down the wall, pulling her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible. This was how it ended. Not with dramatic escape or rescue or justice. Just quietly, in a cell, punished for a crime she didn't commit by a system that would never believe a servant over a Luna. "Fight," her wolf whispered. "Don't give up." But Kristen was so tired of fighting. So tired of surviving. What was the point if survival just meant more suffering? Above her, she heard the commotion of the Alpha's return. Footsteps, voices, celebration. Marvin Swindell was home from war, triumphant and powerful. And tomorrow morning, he would execute a maid he'd never noticed for attacking a wife he barely knew. Some stories didn't have happy endings. Kristen had learned that lesson the night rogues killed her parents. She'd just forgotten it for a moment, let herself hope that silence and endurance might somehow be enough. But hope was a luxury for people who weren't already dead. Engagement questions. Have you ever been blamed for something you didn't do? What would you do if you were Kristen right now? Marvin Swindell stood in his home for the first time in a month and felt like a stranger in his own territory. The pack house gleamed, every surface polished, every flower fresh, everything perfect. Too perfect. The kind of perfection that felt performative rather than welcoming. His wife stood at the base of the grand staircase, resplendent in emerald silk, her face carefully made up except for 3 angry scratches across her left cheek. Her smile was practiced, beautiful, empty. "Welcome home, Alpha," Vivienne said, dipping into a graceful curtsy. "I've missed you terribly." Marvin studied those scratches, his alpha instincts prickling. "What happened to your face?" "An unfortunate incident." Vivienne's hand fluttered to the marks. One of the servants attacked me this morning. Quite frightening, really, but the situation has been handled. Attacked you? Marvin's voice sharpened. Who? A girl named Kristen. She'd been behaving strangely for weeks. I suspect some kind of mental instability. I caught her stealing, and when I confronted her, she became violent. Vivienne's eyes filled with tears. I'm just grateful the guards arrived when they did. She's in the cells now, awaiting your judgment. Something about the story didn't sit right. Marvin had learned to trust his instincts during his years as Alpha. They'd kept him alive through countless battles and political maneuverings. And right now, every instinct was screaming that something was off. I'll deal with it after I've settled in, he said carefully. Actually, I thought given the severity of the crime, we might hold the execution at dawn. Pack law is quite clear about assaulting the Luna. Vivienne moved closer, her hand resting on his arm. I'd feel safer knowing the threat was eliminated quickly. Marvin looked at his wife of 7 years and tried to feel something beyond political obligation. Their marriage had been arranged by his father, an alliance between packs, nothing more. They shared a home, a title, public appearances. But they'd never shared a bed beyond the first year, never shared confidences, never truly been partners. I'll see the prisoner first, Marvin decided, before any execution. Vivienne's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, Alpha, though I'm not sure what there is to see, the evidence is clear. Humor me. Marvin turned to his beta, Oswin Drake, who'd been standing silent observation since they'd arrived. Have the prisoner brought to the council room. I want to question her personally. Oswin's dark eyes flickered with something that might have been approval. Yes, Alpha, though given that she allegedly attacked the Luna, perhaps it would be safer to question her in her cell. Safer for whom? Marvin asked, and Oswin smiled grimly. Good point. I'll have her brought up under guard. As his beta left to arrange it, Vivienne's perfectly manicured hand tightened on Marvin's arm. Darling, you've just returned from war. You must be exhausted. Surely this can wait? No. Marvin gently but firmly removed her hand. If I'm going to execute someone, I'll look them in the eyes first. That's my responsibility as Alpha. He left his wife standing at the base of the stairs, her smile frozen in place, and made his way to his private study. 7 years of marriage, and he'd never quite figured out what went on behind those beautiful eyes. Perhaps he'd never tried hard enough. Perhaps he'd been too focused on pack business, border wars, political maneuvering to notice what was happening in his own home. The thought unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. Oswin appeared at his study door 15 minutes later. Alpha, the prisoner is in the council room. Guards are posted, but... He hesitated. But what? You should see for yourself. The council room was a formal space used for pack meetings and judgment hearings. Marvin entered to find 2 guards flanking a girl who barely looked old enough to be out of her teens. She stood with her head down, dark hair falling forward to hide her face, hands cuffed in silver that had to be burning her if she was a shifter. But something about her scent suggested human, odd for a servant in a pack house. Look at me, Marvin commanded, using his alpha voice. The girl's head rose slowly, revealing a face that was striking in an unconventional way, high cheekbones, full lips, and eyes that were a startling shade of amber. Not human eyes. Shifter eyes, Marvin's breath caught. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, in a haunted sort of way, but because her scent suddenly resolved itself in his mind, cutting through the undertones of fear and pain to something that made his wolf surge forward with recognition. Mate. The word echoed through his consciousness like a bell. This girl, this prisoner condemned to die, was his mate. Not Vivienne, whom he'd been politically bound to for 7 years. This stranger, this servant he'd never noticed, carried his mate's scent. And then he remembered. 5 years ago, during a formal dinner, he'd been standing with visiting dignitaries when movement caught his eye, a new servant girl carrying linens across the far end of the hall. Their eyes had met for maybe 3 seconds before she'd quickly looked away and hurried out. He'd thought nothing of it at the time, dismissed it as fleeting curiosity. But his wolf had recognized her then, and he'd been too blind to understand. Did you attack my Luna? Marvin forced his voice to remain steady, professional, even as everything in him was screaming to protect her. No, Alpha. Her voice was quiet but clear. I raised my hands to defend myself when she reached for a hot poker. She staged the rest. The guards shifted uncomfortably. Marvin held up a hand to silence them. That's a serious accusation. I know, Alpha, but it's the truth. The girl, Kristen, finally met his eyes fully. I know you won't believe me. I know I'll hang tomorrow regardless. But I won't lie and say I attacked her when I didn't. I've spent 5 years surviving. I won't spend my last day lying. 5 years? Marvin's attention sharpened. You've been serving my wife for 5 years. Yes, Alpha. And in those 5 years, have you ever caused trouble, acted violently, given anyone reason to think you're unstable? Kristen hesitated. You could ask the other servants, Alpha. They know my character. I'm asking you. No, Alpha, I've never caused trouble. I keep my eyes down, do my work, and try to survive each day. That's all I've ever done. Something in her voice, the exhaustion, the resignation made Marvin's instincts flare again. Guards, remove her cuffs. Alpha, if she's dangerous, one guard protested. If she's dangerous, she's had multiple opportunities to attack. She's had her hands free in Luna's private chambers for years. One moment of alleged violence doesn't change her entire pattern of behavior. Remove the cuffs. They obeyed, though reluctantly. The silver fell away, revealing angry red burns on Kristen's wrists. Fresh burns, from cuffs that had only been on for a few hours. You're a shifter, Marvin said quietly. Yes, Alpha. Why does your file say you're human? Because my wolf is blocked, has been since childhood. I can't shift, can't access pack bonds, can't hear the moon's call. For all practical purposes, I am human. Blocked how? Kristen's expression shuddered. Trauma, Alpha. I witnessed my parents' murder by rogues when I was 10. My wolf retreated so deep I've never been able to reach her again. Marvin absorbed this information, his mind racing. A shifter serving as a human servant. A girl who'd survived her parents' murder only to spend 5 years in silence. And now, suddenly, violently unstable enough to attack Luna. None of it added up. Roll up your sleeves, he commanded. Kristen's eyes widened with something that looked like panic. Alpha, your sleeves. Now, with trembling hands, she complied. Both arms were covered in scars, burns, cuts, marks of systematic abuse spanning years. Some were old and faded. Others were newer, still pink with healing. You're back, Marvin said, his voice dangerously quiet. Alpha, please, show me you're back. The Alpha command left her no choice. Kristen turned and lifted her shirt with shaking hands. Marvin heard the guard's sharp intakes of breath, heard Oswin's muttered curse. Her back was a canvas of horror, whip scars layering over older scars, burn marks in deliberate patterns, evidence of torture that had been inflicted with methodical precision over a long period of time. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't discipline. This was cruelty for its own sake. How long? Marvin's voice came out rough with barely controlled rage. His alpha aura flooded the room, making both guards drop to one knee and Oswin bare his throat in automatic submission. 5 years, Alpha, Kristen whispered, lowering her shirt with careful movements that spoke of chronic pain. Since you looked at me during that dinner, she said you wanted me, that I was trying to steal you. So she made sure I'd never be pretty enough to tempt anyone ever again. Marvin remembered that glance now with horrible clarity. 3 seconds of eye contact with a girl carrying linens. 3 seconds that his mate Bond had recognized, even if he hadn't understood. 3 seconds that had condemned her to 5 years of torture. And this morning, he asked, forcing his voice to remain steady even as his wolf howled for blood. This morning, she reached for a hot poker. I thought she was going to burn me again. I raised my hands to protect my face. Kristen's voice was completely flat, emotionless. She saw her opportunity, dropped the poker, broke a vase, scratched her own face, tore her dress, and screamed for guards. It was clever, actually. One moment of self-defense turned into assault, one servant's word against Luna's authority. You were scheduled to hang at dawn, Oswin said quietly, for a crime you didn't commit. Yes, Beta, but I've been dead for 5 years. Tomorrow would just make it official. The resignation in her voice broke something inside Marvin. This girl, his mate, had been tortured under his own roof by his own wife while he'd been blind to all of it. How many times had he passed her in corridors? How many times had she served him dinner with fresh burns hidden under her uniform? How many times had she endured hell while he remained completely oblivious? "Oswin," Marvin said, his voice carrying alpha command. "I want you to investigate this. Thoroughly. Interview every servant who's worked with Kristen. Talk to the pack healer about any suspicious injuries. Find out if anyone else has complained about the Luna's treatment. I want evidence documented, witnessed, undeniable." "Yes, Alpha." Oswin's eyes were sharp with understanding. "And the execution?" "Postponed indefinitely. Kristen, you'll remain in custody for your own protection, but I'm moving you to the guest wing under guard. You'll receive medical treatment, proper food, and safety until we sort this out." "You believe me?" Kristen's voice cracked with disbelief. "You believe a servant over your Luna?" "I believe the evidence. And your back tells a story that contradicts my wife's version of events." Marvin moved closer, and Kristen immediately flinched away, a deeply ingrained defensive reaction. He stopped, maintaining distance. "I'm not going to hurt you. I swear on my alpha oath, no one in this pack will hurt you again." A single tear slid down Kristen's cheek. "You can't promise that, Alpha. She's the Luna. She's untouchable." "No one," Marvin repeated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "is untouchable. Not even a Luna. Especially not a Luna who's tortured an innocent member of my pack for 5 years." He turned to the guards. "Escort her to the blue guest room. Post protection outside her door. Anyone who tries to enter without my explicit permission answers to me personally." "Understood." "Yes, Alpha." As they led Kristen away, gently now, respectfully, Oswin moved to stand beside Marvin. "You recognized her." It wasn't a question. Oswin had been Marvin's beta for 15 years, his best friend for even longer. He'd know. "She's my mate," Marvin said quietly. "Has been for 5 years, apparently. I was too blind to see it. And Vivienne knew. Vivienne saw what I didn't. Saw the recognition in that one glance and decided to destroy her before." Marvin's hands clenched into fists. "Before I ever figured it out. What are you going to do?" Marvin looked at his beta, his friend, his most trusted advisor. "I'm going to find the truth, all of it, and then I'm going to make sure justice is served, regardless of who it implicates. Even if it's your Luna. Especially if it's my Luna." Marvin's voice was ice. "Because if Vivienne did this, if she systematically tortured an innocent girl for 5 years out of jealousy, then she's not my Luna. She's a monster wearing a crown, and monsters don't get to hide behind titles in my pack." Oswin nodded slowly. "This is going to get ugly. It already is ugly. We're just finally looking at it." After Oswin left to begin his investigation, Marvin stood alone in the council room, staring at the chair where Kristen had sat. His mate. Tortured, broken, resigned to death, right under his nose while he'd been busy fighting border wars and managing politics. Some alpha he was, some protector, but he would make it right. Whatever it took, however messy it got, he would find the truth and ensure Kristen never had to endure another moment of suffering. That was his oath. As an alpha, as a mate, as a man who'd finally opened his eyes. "Y'all, I'm not okay. 5 years of torture, because of a 3-second glance. And now Marvin's like, oh hey, she's my mate. Maybe I should have noticed the years of abuse happening in my own house. Better late than never, I guess. If you're sitting there yelling, finally someone believes her, hit that like button. And subscribe because in the next chapter, we're diving into the investigation and trust me, what Oswin finds is going to make your blood boil. You don't want to miss this. Engagement questions. Would you forgive Marvin for not noticing sooner? Do you think Vivienne will try to stop the investigation? Oswin Drake had been beta long enough to know that the worst crimes often hid in plain sight, protected by power and willful blindness. But even he wasn't prepared for what he discovered in the first hour of investigating Kristen Egan's allegations. He started with the pack healer, Dr. Helena Cross, a woman who'd served Blackridge Pack for 30 years and had a reputation for discretion that bordered on secrecy. "You're asking about the Luna's maid." Helena's expression was carefully neutral when Oswin appeared at her office door. "I'm asking about Kristen Egan specifically. Has she ever come to you for treatment?" Helena was silent for a long moment, her weathered hands resting on her desk. Finally, she stood and locked her office door. What I'm about to show you could get me killed, or exiled, possibly both. She moved to a hidden panel behind a bookshelf, revealing a secret compartment. Inside were dozens of leather-bound journals, each marked with dates. She pulled one from 3 years ago and opened it to a page covered in detailed medical notes. Kristen Egan, age 19. Multiple burns consistent with hot iron application. Patient reports accidental contact with kitchen equipment. Treated wounds, dispensed burn ointment, advised more caution. Personal notation, burns appear deliberately inflicted. Pattern suggests torture, not accident. Patient showed signs of extreme distress when questioned. Suspect abuse but cannot confirm without patient cooperation. Oswin read the entry, then the next one, then the next. Page after page of suspicious injuries, burns, cuts, bruises, evidence of starvation and dehydration. All treated, all documented, all carefully noted as accidents in the official records, while Helena's private notes told a very different story. Why didn't you report this? Oswin's voice was rougher than he intended. To whom? Helena's eyes were haunted. The Luna. The Alpha who was never here. The council who defers to Luna's authority over household matters. She closed the journal with shaking hands. I tried, Beta. 3 years ago, I went to Luna Vivienne directly and expressed concern about Kristen's frequent injuries. Do you know what she did? Tell me. She thanked me for my vigilance. Explained that Kristen was clumsy, accident-prone, that she'd been considering letting her go, but felt charitable keeping her employed despite her incompetence. Helena's voice hardened. And then, 2 days later, my daughter received a letter. It was unsigned, but the message was clear. If I continued interfering in the Luna's household affairs, unfortunate accidents might befall my family. My daughter lives 3 territories away with her mate and children. But the letter included photographs of her home, her children's school, detailed information about their daily routines. Oswin felt ice in his stomach. The Luna threatened your family. The letter was unsigned. I had no proof. And Kristen never confirmed the abuse. She insisted every injury was her own carelessness. What could I do except document everything secretly and pray someone with power would eventually notice? I'm noticing now. 5 years too late. Helena met his eyes. That girl has been systematically tortured, Beta. Not punished for infractions. Not disciplined for mistakes. Tortured for the crime of existing in the Luna's proximity. And I've watched it happen, documented it, and done nothing because I was too afraid for my family to risk everything on the word of a powerless servant against a Luna. Oswin took the journals, all of them. The Alpha knows now, and he's not looking away. What changed? He saw her back. Helena closed her eyes. Then he knows. Anyone who sees those scars knows. Oswin's next stop was the servants' quarters, where he found Mabel Winters in her small room, darning socks by lamplight. The former head maid looked up when he entered, and her weathered face showed no surprise. Wondered when you'd come asking questions, Beta. Heard Kristen was arrested. Heard she's to hang for attacking the Luna. Mabel set down her darning. Also heard the Alpha postpone the execution and moved her to the guest wing. So either he's crueler than I thought, making her comfortable before killing her, or he's finally opened his eyes. He's opened his eyes. Tell me what you saw. Mabel was quiet for a long moment. I was head maid until 2 years ago. Supervised all household staff, managed Luna's personal attendants, oversaw daily operations. It was a good position. Respected. I'd held it for 20 years. What changed? I walked in on the Luna burning Kristen with a fireplace poker. It was deliberate, methodical. The girl was gagged so she couldn't scream. The Luna saw me standing in the doorway and smiled, actually smiled, and said, Mabel, you're looking tired. Perhaps it's time you considered retirement. Oswin's hands clenched. And you left. I was 63 years old, Beta. I had no mate, no children, no family except this pack. The Luna made it clear that if I spoke about what I'd seen, my retirement would be far less comfortable. She could have me declared rogue, stripped of pack protection, sent into the world with nothing. Mabel's voice shook. I'm ashamed to say I took the comfortable retirement. I moved to the small cottage on the edge of territory and told myself Kristen would survive like she always had. That it wasn't my responsibility to save her. But you knew. I knew, and I said nothing. And that girl suffered for 2 more years while I tended my garden and pretended I didn't hear her screaming in my dreams. Mabel looked up, her eyes wet. So yes, Beta, I'll testify. I'll tell the council everything I saw. It won't erase my cowardice, but maybe it'll help save her now. It will. Oswin found 3 more former attendants, women who'd left the Luna's service under various pretenses over the past 5 years. Each had similar stories, witnessing abuse, being threatened or bribed into silence, leaving rather than become the next target or bear witness to Kristen's suffering. By the time the sun set, Oswin had a folder full of statements, Helena's illegal journals, and a timeline that painted a devastating picture. Vivienne Thorne hadn't just abused one girl. She'd created a system of terror that kept everyone complicit through fear. But there was one more interview to conduct, one that Oswin had been dreading. He found Kristen in the blue guest room, sitting by the window wrapped in a blanket, staring at the forest. She looked smaller somehow, younger, despite the evidence of 5 years of suffering written across her visible skin. Beta, she stood when he entered, automatic deference even now. Sit, please. I need to ask you some questions, but this isn't an interrogation. You're not on trial here. Kristen sat slowly, tension vibrating through her frame. Oswin pulled a chair to sit across from her, maintaining respectful distance. Tell me about the first time Luna Vivienne hurt you. Kristen was silent so long Oswin thought she wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, it was 5 years ago, 3 days after that dinner where the alpha glanced at me. I was preparing the Luna's bath when she came in early. She asked me if I thought I was pretty. I didn't answer. I'd learned young that answering personal questions from superiors was dangerous, so I stayed quiet. What happened? She grabbed my arm and held it under the bathwater. It was scalding, hot enough to turn the skin bright red immediately. She held it there and asked again if I thought I was pretty, if I thought I was pretty enough to steal her husband. Kristen's voice was mechanical, reciting facts without emotion. I said no. She held it under longer and asked if I was lying. I said I wasn't lying. She let go and told me to finish preparing her bath. Then she said, "You'll learn, little mouse. Beauty is meaningless if no one's allowed to see it, and no one will ever see you." Did you report it? To whom? I was 17, an orphan with no status, serving the Luna of the pack. Who would believe me? Who would care? Kristen pulled the blanket tighter. The burns from that first incident healed, but she made sure to add new ones regularly. Maintenance, she called it, keeping me reminded of my place. Oswin felt rage building in his chest but forced it down. Kristen needed him calm, professional, trustworthy. Why did you stay? Where would I go? I have no family, no pack connections, no resources. My wolf is blocked, so I can't even access the strength to survive as a rogue. Leaving meant dying slower and more painfully than staying. Kristen finally looked at him. At least here I had food most days, shelter, the illusion of safety. Out there I'd have nothing. You chose survival. I chose existence. There's a difference. Oswin pulled out his folder of statements. Kristen, I've spent the day talking to people who witnessed what you endured. Dr. Helena has medical records spanning years. Mabel saw the Luna hurt you directly. 3 former attendants have similar stories. We have evidence, real, documented, undeniable evidence of systematic abuse. Evidence doesn't matter. Kristen's voice was flat. She's the Luna. I'm nobody. The system protects her. The system protects justice. And right now, justice demands answers about why the Luna of Blackridge Pack has been torturing a member of her household for 5 years. Oswin leaned forward. I need you to testify before the council. Tell them everything, exactly what you told me, with as much detail as you can remember. It'll be hard. They'll question you, challenge you, try to discredit you, but you won't be alone. The Alpha himself will be advocating for truth. Why would he do that? What am I to him? Oswin considered how much to reveal. Marvin hadn't explicitly given him permission to share the mate bond, but Kristen deserved to know why the Alpha suddenly cared. You're his mate. Kristen stared at him. That's not possible, he's married. Politically, not truly. You carry his mate scent. He recognized it the moment he truly looked at you. That glance 5 years ago. That was mate recognition, even if he didn't understand it at the time. His wolf knew. Vivienne saw it, and she spent 5 years trying to destroy you before he figured it out. So this is about mate bonds and politics. Kristen laughed bitterly. Not about justice or right and wrong, just wolves and their instincts. It's about all of those things. Oswin's voice softened. But mostly, it's about an alpha who's realized something terrible happened under his watch, to someone under his protection, and is determined to make it right. The mate bond might be why he looked closely enough to see the truth. But what comes next is about justice. What does come next? Council hearing, full investigation. If the evidence supports what we already know, Luna Vivienne will be stripped of her title, divorced under pack law, and banished from Blackridge territory permanently. And if it doesn't, then I haven't done my job right. Oswin stood. Get some rest, eat the food they bring you, let the healer examine you properly. Tomorrow we begin building the case that will free you completely. Beta, Kristen's voice stopped him at the door. Why do you care, really? I'm nobody. Saving me gains you nothing politically. Oswin turned back. My sister was in an abusive mating. She stayed silent for 3 years because she was afraid no one would believe her, afraid of what would happen if she spoke up. By the time she finally told me, it was too late. Her mate had done permanent damage to her wolf. She can't shift anymore, can barely leave her home due to anxiety. He met Kristen's eyes. I failed her by not seeing the signs sooner, by not creating an environment where she felt safe speaking up. I won't fail you the same way. After Oswin left, Kristen sat in the growing darkness, processing everything. Mate bonds, evidence, testimony, justice. It all felt surreal, like a dream she'd wake from to find herself back in her closet, tending new burns, preparing for another day of silent suffering. But the soft blanket around her shoulders was real. The food someone had brought earlier, real food, not scraps, was real. The absence of pain for the first time in recent memory was real. Maybe, impossibly, this was actually happening. Deep inside her chest, her wolf stirred again. Stronger this time, more present, as if safety had given her permission to begin waking from her long sleep. Mate, the wolf whispered. Protect, trust. Kristen wasn't ready to trust. Wasn't ready to believe this wasn't just another form of cruelty, hope given only to be ripped away more painfully. But maybe she could testify. Maybe she could tell her truth, regardless of the outcome. Maybe speaking after 5 years of silence was its own form of justice, even if the system still failed her in the end. At least she would have used her voice while she still had one. That was something. That was more than she'd had yesterday. Engagement questions. Would you have the courage to testify after years of silence? Do you think the evidence will be enough to convict a Luna? The council convened 3 days after Marvin's return, assembled in the formal chamber with all the ceremony pack law required. 7 elders sat in elevated positions, their weathered faces showing decades of leadership. Pack members filled the gallery. Word had spread about the Luna's impending judgment, and everyone wanted to witness what happened when the powerful finally faced consequences. Kristen sat in the witness section, flanked by Oswin on one side and Dr. Helena on the other. She wore simple but clean clothes, her hair pulled back to reveal her face completely. No hiding, no shrinking. If she was going to speak, she would do it while looking her accusers in the eyes. Vivienne sat across the chamber in the defendant's section, dressed in pale blue silk that made her look innocent and fragile. Her father, Alpha Sela's Thorn of the Ironwood Pack, sat beside her, a political power move that sent a clear message. Challenging Vivienne meant challenging her family's influence. Marvin stood at the Alpha's position, his face carved from stone, radiating authority that made even the elders shift uncomfortably. He'd barely spoken to his wife since beginning the investigation. They existed in the same house like strangers, Vivienne's attempts at reconciliation or explanation hitting a wall of ice. This council is convened to hear evidence regarding allegations of systematic abuse committed by Luna Vivienne Thorne against Kristen Egan, member of this pack. Elder Judith's voice carried through the chamber. Beta Oswin Drake will present the prosecution's case. Oswin stood, his folder of evidence precisely organized. Elders, pack witnesses, members of Blackridge, what we're here to discuss isn't a simple dispute between Luna and Servant. This is documented evidence of 5 years of systematic torture, witnessed by multiple parties, recorded in medical journals, and covered up through threats and intimidation. He projected Helena's journals onto screens around the chamber. Page after page of medical notes, private observations, documented injuries. The gallery murmured, shocked whispers spreading like wildfire. "Dr. Helena Cross, our pack healer, will testify first." Helena stood, her hands trembling slightly but her voice steady. "I treated Kristen Egan for suspicious injuries over 40 times in 5 years. Burns, cuts, bruises, signs of starvation and dehydration. Each time she claimed accidents. Each time my medical assessment concluded the injuries were deliberately inflicted. I kept private records because I suspected abuse but couldn't prove it without patient cooperation." "Why didn't you report these suspicions?" Elder Nathaniel asked. "I tried. I approached Luna Vivienne 3 years ago to express concern. 2 days later, my daughter, who lives in a different territory, received threatening letters with photographs of her home. Her children detailed information about their routines. The message was clear. Stay silent or watch your family suffer." The gallery erupted. Vivienne's father stood, his face red with rage. "This is slander. My daughter would never—" "Sit down, Alpha Silas." Marvin's voice cracked like a whip. "You'll have your chance to speak. Right now, we're listening to evidence." Oswin called Mabel next, then the 3 former attendants. Each told their story, witnessing abuse, being threatened or bribed, leaving rather than become complicit. The pattern emerged clearly. Vivienne had created a system of terror, silencing witnesses through strategic manipulation. "And now," Oswin said, "I call Kristen Egan to testify." Kristen stood on shaking legs, making her way to the witness stand. Every eye in the chamber followed her, hundreds of pack members watching, judging, deciding whether to believe. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like she was being flayed open for public consumption. But she'd survived 5 years of actual torture. She could survive this. "Kristen," Oswin's voice was gentle, "tell the council what happened 5 years ago, 3 days after Alpha Marvin glanced at you during dinner." Kristen took a breath and began. She told them everything: the first burn, the escalating violence, the threats, the starvation, the isolation. She described burns and whips, and cruelty delivered with methodical precision. She explained how Vivienne would hurt her while smiling, would discuss household matters while pressing hot iron to skin, would apologize for maintenance while adding new scars. The chamber was utterly silent. "Why didn't you report this?" Elder Nathaniel asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "To whom? I was 17, an orphan, serving the lunar of the pack. Who would have believed a nobody over the Alpha's wife? Who would have cared?" Kristen's voice strengthened. "And more importantly, who would have stopped her? She had absolute power over the household. The Alpha was rarely home. The servants were too terrified to intervene. I had nowhere to go, no one to help, no reason to believe speaking up would do anything except make my death come faster. So you stayed silent. I survived. That's what people in my position do. We survive however we can, and we try not to think too hard about the cost." Vivienne's lawyer stood. "Miss Egan, isn't it true that you have a history of mental instability? That your wolf is blocked due to psychological trauma?" "Yes. And isn't it possible that in your mentally compromised state, you misinterpreted normal discipline as abuse?" Kristen met the lawyer's eyes. "Show me your back and I'll show you mine. Then we'll discuss what constitutes normal discipline versus systematic torture." "That's not an answer." "Then here's an answer." Kristen stood and turned her back to the chamber. Slowly, she lifted her shirt, revealing the full extent of the scarring. The gallery gasped, several people crying out in horror. "This is 5 years of normal discipline. This is what happens when power goes unchecked, when cruelty hides behind status, when nobody with authority cares enough to look." She lowered her shirt and faced the council again. "I'm not mentally compromised. I'm traumatized. There's a difference. My mind is perfectly clear. I remember every burn, every whip crack, every moment of 5 years of torture. And I remember the Alpha's wife smiling while she delivered it." Vivienne finally stood, her composure cracking. "You're lying. You were clumsy, accident-prone, constantly hurting yourself. Then explain the medical records showing burns in patterns consistent with restraint and deliberate application," Oswin interjected. "Explain why 3 separate attendants have identical stories about leaving your service after witnessing abuse. Explain why our healer kept illegal private records documenting her suspicions." "I don't have to explain anything to you," Vivienne's voice rose. "I'm the Lunar of this pack. I have authority over household matters, including discipline of servants who step out of line." "Discipline?" Marvin's voice was dangerously quiet. "Is that what you call systematic torture?" She needed to learn her place. "Her place?" Marvin stood, his alpha aura flooding the chamber. "Her place as what? A victim of your jealousy? A target for your cruelty? Someone whose only crime was being looked at for 3 seconds by a mate bond she didn't even know existed?" The chamber fell silent. The revelation of mate bonds shifted everything. This wasn't just about abuse of power. It was about a Luna deliberately destroying her husband's true mate. Vivienne's face went white. "You knew." "I know now." Marvin's voice was ice. "I know that 5 years ago. My wolf recognized its mate in a passing glance. I was too blind to understand what that recognition meant. But you saw it. You recognized the threat. And instead of confronting me about it, instead of dealing with our sham marriage honestly, you decided to systematically destroy an innocent girl to eliminate competition that didn't even exist in her mind. She was trying to steal you. She was a 17-year-old orphan doing her job. The only person who saw her as competition was you." Marvin's control finally snapped. "You tortured my mate for 5 years because of your own insecurity. You created a system of terror in my pack house, threatened pack members, manipulated witnesses, and staged a false assault to justify executing her. And now you stand there and try to justify it as discipline." Vivienne's mask shattered completely. "You were mine. The political marriage, the Luna title, the status. I earned all of it. And then this nobody shows up, and you look at her like she's something special. No, I made sure you'd never want to look at her again. I made sure she'd know exactly how worthless she was. And I'd do it again because she deserved every burn, every scar, every moment of pain for daring to exist in your proximity." The chamber erupted. Elder Judith's voice cut through the chaos. "Luna Vivienne, you've just confessed before this council to 5 years of systematic torture and attempted murder. Do you understand what you've done?" Vivienne looked around wildly, finally realizing she'd destroyed herself. Her father stood, his face gray with horror and political calculation. "My daughter is unwell, clearly suffering from some kind of breakdown. I request mercy from this council." "Your daughter is a sadistic abuser who's confessed to her crimes publicly," Marvin interrupted. "She doesn't get mercy. She gets justice. If you punish her severely, it could trigger political consequences between our packs. Then trigger them." Marvin's voice carried absolute finality. "I won't compromise justice to protect your family's reputation. Your daughter tortured an innocent member of my pack for 5 years. She threatened witnesses. She staged a false assault. She attempted murder through manipulation of pack law. These aren't the actions of someone having a breakdown. These are calculated, deliberate crimes that demand consequences." Alpha Silas's face hardened. "You're making a mistake, Alpha Marvin." "No. The mistake was made 5 years ago when I failed to see what was happening in my own home. I won't compound it by letting your daughter escape the consequences of her actions." Marvin turned to the council. "I invoke my right as Alpha to formally dissolve my mate bond with Vivienne Thorne under the grounds of systematic abuse, endangerment of pack members, and irreparable breach of Luna duties. I demand she be stripped of her title, divorced from this pack, and banished permanently from Blackridge territory." Elder Judith nodded gravely. "The council agrees. Vivienne Thorne, you are hereby stripped of your Luna title, divorced from Blackridge pack, and banished permanently. You have 3 days to remove yourself from this territory. If you're found within our borders after that time, you'll be treated as a hostile rogue." "No!" Vivienne lunged toward Marvin, but guards intercepted her. "You can't do this. I'm your wife. You were never my wife. You were a political arrangement that I tolerated out of duty. But you stopped being Luna the moment you raised a hand to someone under my protection." Marvin's voice was cold. "Guards, escort the former Luna Thorne from this chamber. She's no longer welcome in Blackridge territory." As they dragged Vivienne away, still screaming threats and justifications, Alpha Silas approached Marvin. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is. Your daughter confessed. Public, witnessed, recorded. If you want to start a political war over her banishment, go ahead. But every pack in the region will know why she was banished, and they'll judge you for defending her." Marvin met the older Alpha's eyes. "Cut your losses, Silas. Disown her publicly, express horror at her actions, and maybe you'll salvage something from this disaster. But if you come after my pack or my mate in retaliation, I'll make sure everyone knows the Thorns protect abusers." Silas's face worked through rage, calculation, political pragmatism. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Consider her disowned. The Thorne family has no connection to Vivienne's actions or consequences." He turned and left without another word, political survival trumping family loyalty. In the sudden quiet after the chaos, Kristen remained standing at the witness stand, shaking with reaction. Everything had happened so fast: the confession, the sentencing, Vivienne's complete breakdown. Justice had actually been served. She'd spoken her truth and been believed. Marvin approached slowly, carefully, maintaining respectful distance. "Are you okay?" "I don't know." Kristen's voice shook. "I think so. I don't know what okay feels like anymore." "That's fair." Marvin gestured to the guards. "Escort Kristen back to the guest wing. Make sure she has everything she needs. And someone find Mabel. I want Kristen to have familiar, friendly faces around her right now." As they let her out, Kristen glanced back at the Alpha who'd finally seen her, who'd believed her, who'd used his power to fight for justice instead of status quo. Their eyes met across the chamber, and something passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. Acknowledgement. The beginning of trust. Maybe healing was possible after all. Maybe speaking her truth had been worth the terror. Maybe she could actually have a future instead of just survival. That was enough for now. That was more than enough. Vivienne really confessed in front of the entire council. The way she basically told on herself because she couldn't handle being called out. Chef's kiss. That's what we call karma. And her dad just disowed her to save his political reputation. Ice cold, but honestly valid. If you're sitting there feeling vindicated on Kristen's behalf, smash that like button. Subscribe because next phase we're getting into the healing process, and trust me, the mate bond development is about to be so good. Don't miss it. 3 weeks after Vivienne's banishment, Kristen still woke up expecting pain. Her body remembered 5 years of torture, expected burns and whips and hunger. Instead, she woke in soft sheets, sunlight streaming through windows she was allowed to open, and the smell of breakfast someone else had prepared drifting up from the kitchens. It felt surreal, like a dream she'd wake from any moment. Dr. Helena visited daily, monitoring her physical healing and gently probing her emotional state. "Your back is responding well to treatment. The scarring will never fully disappear, but we're minimizing it as much as possible. How's the pain?" "Less every day." Kristen sat still while Helena examined the healing marks. "It's strange, not hurting all the time. I keep waiting for it to come back. That's normal. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the source is gone. Your body learned to expect pain. It'll take time to unlearn that pattern." Helena's hands were gentle, careful. "Have you been having the nightmares?" "Every night." Kristen's voice was quiet. "But they're different now. Before, I dream about the torture. Now I dream about her coming back, finding ways past the guards, finishing what she started." "She can't come back. She's banished, disowned, stripped of all status. If she steps foot in Blackridge territory, she'll be killed on sight." "I know that logically, but logic doesn't stop the nightmares." Helena finished her examination and sat across from Kristen. "I want you to consider speaking with someone who specializes in trauma recovery. I can treat your physical wounds, but you need someone trained in helping survivors process what you've endured." Kristen had resisted this suggestion before, but maybe it was time. "Okay, I'll try." After Helena left, Mabel appeared with lunch, actual food, not scraps, served on real dishes. The older woman had become a constant presence, appointed by Marvin as Kristen's personal attendant and companion. The alpha sent word he'd like to visit this afternoon, if you're comfortable with it, Mabel said, setting the tray down. He's been asking daily but doesn't want to push if you're not ready. Kristen considered. Marvin had kept his distance since the council hearing, giving her space to process and heal. But he sent messages, books he thought she'd like, reports on Vivienne's confirmed departure from the territory, assurances that she was safe. Small gestures that didn't demand anything in return. Tell him yes, I'll see him. Mabel smiled. Good, that man's been beside himself wanting to check on you personally but terrified of overwhelming you. It's actually kind of endearing, watching an alpha tie himself in knots over proper protocol. He could just order me to see him. He's the alpha. And you're his mate. Even a blind wolf knows you don't order your mate around. You ask permission and hope they say yes. Mabel squeezed Kristen's hand. He's trying to do right by you in ways he failed before. That's worth something. After lunch, Kristen found herself nervous. She'd barely spoken to Marvin since the hearing, seen him from a distance, received his messages, but not actually talked. What did you say to the man who'd saved you? Who'd believed you when no one else would? Who happened to be your mate through biology you didn't ask for? The knock came at exactly the appointed time. Kristen opened the door to find Marvin standing in the hallway, looking uncomfortable in casual clothes, holding a small potted plant. I brought you something, he said, then immediately looked sheepish. That sounds ridiculous. I saved you from years of torture, here's a plant. But Mabel mentioned you'd been looking at the gardens, so I thought. He stopped, took a breath. May I come in? Yes. Kristen stepped aside, fighting a smile at seeing an alpha so thoroughly flustered. Marvin entered, set the plant on the windowsill, and then stood awkwardly in the middle of the room like he wasn't sure what to do with his hands. How are you healing? Better every day. Helena says the scars will fade. I'm glad. Marvin was quiet for a moment. Kristen, I need to apologize properly. Not just for failing to see what was happening, but for creating an environment where it could happen at all. You suffered for 5 years in my territory, under my authority, because I was too blind or too busy to notice. That's on me. Not Vivienne's cruelty, that's hers alone. But my failure to protect you. That's mine. You didn't know. I should have known. That's what alphas do. We pay attention to our pack. We notice when something's wrong. We protect the vulnerable. I failed at all of that. His voice roughened. And I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. I can't undo the past 5 years. But I can promise you'll never face that kind of danger again. Not from anyone, not for any reason. Kristen studied him, this powerful alpha who'd used his authority to fight for her, who divorced his political wife and weathered the scandal, who stood in her room looking genuinely devastated by his own blindness. I believe you. You do. Marvin looked surprised. You could have covered it up, could have quietly punished Vivienne and moved on, protected your reputation and political alliances. Instead, you made it public, demanded justice regardless of the cost, put my safety above pack politics. Kristen moved to sit by the window. Actions matter more than apologies. Your actions proved you meant what you said. Marvin sat carefully in the chair across from her, maintaining distance. There's something else we need to talk about, the mate bond. Kristen's hands tightened on her lap. I know, everyone knows now. You announced it at the hearing. I announced it because it was relevant context for Vivienne's motivation. But Kristen, I want you to understand something crucial. The mate bond doesn't obligate you to anything. You don't owe me a relationship, partnership, or even friendship because biology says we're compatible. You've spent 5 years having choices stolen from you. I won't add to that by pressuring you about bonds you didn't ask for. So what do you want? Honestly, I want the chance to know you. Not as alpha and servant, not as mate, but as people. I want to earn your trust if you're willing to give me the chance. And if you're not, if the association with me is too painful or you simply don't want any connection, I'll respect that and arrange for you to have a life completely separate from mine. Your choice. Always your choice. Kristen looked at this alpha who'd saved her, who was now offering her something even more precious than rescue, autonomy. I'm not ready for the mate bond. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. 5 years of torture doesn't just disappear because the source is gone. I know, but, Kristen took a breath. I think I'd like to know you too, as people, without pressure or expectations. Can we start there? Marvin's smile was genuine, transforming his usually stern face into something warmer. We can start wherever you're comfortable. They talked for an hour, careful conversation about neutral topics, learning basic facts about each other. Marvin spoke about his childhood, his training as alpha, his love of strategy games and old books. Kristen shared memories from before her parents' death, her blocked wolf, the small things that brought her joy even during the worst years. It was stilted, awkward, two people learning to be human with each other, but it was a start. There's one more thing, Marvin said as he prepared to leave. I've been thinking about your future not romantically but practically. You've spent 5 years as a servant. What do you want to do now that you're free? Kristen blinked. She'd been so focused on survival, she'd never considered wants beyond basic safety. I don't know. Think about it. Any training you want, any education, any career path, it's yours. You're a member of this pack with full status now, not a servant. You have options. He moved toward the door, then paused. And Kristen, you're allowed to want things now. You're allowed to have dreams beyond survival. It might take time to remember how, but you're allowed. After he left, Kristen sat by the window with the plant he'd brought, a small flowering herb that smelled like hope. She tried to imagine having dreams again, wanting things beyond not being hurt. It felt impossible, but maybe impossible things happen sometimes. After all, 3 weeks ago she'd been in a cell waiting to die. Now she was free, healing, having conversations with an alpha who asked permission instead of demanding obedience. Maybe she could have dreams. Maybe she could want things. Maybe she could even learn to trust again. Deep inside her chest, her wolf stirred more strongly than ever before. Mate, she whispered. Safe. Home. Kristen wasn't ready to agree, but for the first time she wasn't entirely opposed either. That was progress. That was enough. 2 months after Vivienne's banishment, Kristen finally felt strong enough to leave the pack house grounds. Mabel accompanied her on her first venture into the nearby forest, not far, just to the creek that ran through pack territory. The woods were beautiful in ways Kristen had forgotten. Sunlight filtered through leaves, birds sang, and the creek burbled over smooth stones. She sat on the bank, letting the peace sink into her bones. I used to come here as a child, she said quietly. Before the rogues, before my parents died. My mother would bring me here to practice shifting, except I could never quite manage it. My wolf was always shy, even then. And after? Mabel asked gently. After, she disappeared completely. The trauma of watching them die, of hiding in the underbrush while rogues tore them apart. My wolf retreated so deep I've never been able to reach her. Everyone assumed I was human after that. It was easier than explaining I was a broken shifter. Mabel was quiet for a moment. Maybe she wasn't broken. Maybe she was protecting you the only way she knew how. By abandoning me. By keeping you small, unnoticed, beneath the notice of predators. Mabel squeezed her hand. Wolves are survival creatures first. Maybe yours knew you needed to be invisible to survive, so she made you invisible. Kristen had never considered that perspective. What if her wolf hadn't abandoned her but had been trying to protect her all along? Deep inside, her wolf stirred. Safe now, she whispered. Can come out. She's waking up, Kristen breathed. I can feel her more clearly every day. Since Vivienne left, since I felt safe, she's been getting stronger. That's good. That means you're healing. They sat by the creek for an hour, Kristen simply existing in peace for the first time in years. No pain, no fear, no waiting for the next punishment. Just quiet and safety and the possibility of actual healing. When they returned to the pack house, they found Oswin waiting with news. We've received reports that Vivienne has been spotted near the eastern border of our territory. Not crossing, just watching. Kristen's blood went cold. She's coming back. She's testing boundaries, seeing if we'll actually enforce the banishment. Oswin's expression was grim. Marvin's increased patrols, she won't get through. But he wanted you to know, so you weren't caught off guard if you heard rumors. That night, the nightmares returned with intensity. Kristen dreamed of Vivienne slipping past guards, finding her room, finishing what she'd started. She woke gasping, heart pounding, the phantom sensation of burns covering her skin. A soft knock at her door. "Kristen, it's Marvin. I heard you cry out. May I come in?" She should say no, should maintain distance, protect her heart. But right now, she just didn't want to be alone. "Yes." Marvin entered, took in her shaking hands and tear-stained face, and his expression softened. "The nightmares? She's out there, watching, waiting. She's out there breaking the banishment law, which means if she sets foot in our territory, my guards have orders to arrest her on sight. She has no power here anymore, Kristen. None. Then why do I still feel like she controls everything?" Marvin moved slowly, carefully, sitting in the chair beside her bed but not touching. "Because trauma doesn't follow logic. Your body remembers 5 years of pain. It'll take more than 2 months of safety to convince it the danger is actually gone. How do you know so much about trauma?" "My mother." Marvin's voice was quiet. "She was abused by her mate, my father. For years, she endured it in silence because pack law protected him. By the time she found the courage to leave, it was too late. He killed her rather than let her go." He looked at Kristen. "I was 13, old enough to understand what I'd witnessed, young enough to feel completely powerless to stop it. I spent years studying trauma, trying to understand why she'd stayed, how the system had failed her. That's why I pushed for sanctuary laws, for lunar accountability. Because I couldn't save her, but maybe I could prevent it from happening to someone else. Except it did happen, to me. Yes, and I failed again, but this time," Marvin's voice strengthened, "this time I'm not letting the abuser walk away unpunished. This time, justice was served. It doesn't undo the trauma, but maybe it prevents the next one." They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment. Finally, Kristen asked, "Will you stay, just until I fall asleep? I don't want to be alone with the nightmares." "Of course." Marvin settled into the chair, pulling a blanket over himself. "I'll be right here. Sleep, Kristen, you're safe." And somehow, with the alpha keeping watch, Kristen managed to sleep without dreaming. She woke to sunlight and the sound of soft snoring. Marvin had fallen asleep in the chair, his head tilted at an uncomfortable angle, clearly exhausted from his own sleepless nights managing pack business and security concerns. Kristen studied him in the morning light. He'd turned his entire life upside down for her, divorced his wife, weathered political scandal, changed pack laws, spent months carefully rebuilding trust. Not because he had to, but because it was right. Her wolf stirred, stronger than ever. "Mate," she said with certainty. "Good mate. Protects." Kristen still wasn't ready for everything that word implied. But maybe she was ready for more than she'd thought. "Marvin," she spoke softly, not wanting to startle him. He woke instantly, alpha instincts making him alert. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, thank you for staying." "Always." He stretched, wincing at the chair's discomfort. "Though next time I should probably bring better furniture." "Or you could." Kristen stopped, courage faltering. "Or I could do what? Or you could stay on the other side of the bed, not together, just nearby. So I don't feel alone, but you don't destroy your back in a chair." The words tumbled out quickly, nervously. Marvin's expression softened. "Are you sure? I don't want to push." "You're not pushing, I'm asking, that's different." "Okay. Tonight, if you want, I'll stay. On top of the covers on the other side of the bed, fully clothed and respectful of all boundaries." "Thank you." As Marvin left to attend to pack business, Kristen realized something important. She was choosing. Actively choosing connection over isolation, trust over fear, the possibility of healing over the safety of emotional distance. It was terrifying, but it was hers. And that made all the difference. Engagement questions. Is Kristen moving too fast or at the right pace? Do you think Vivienne will actually try to come back? The attack came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, 3 months after Vivienne's banishment. Kristen was in the garden with Mabel, tending to the herb plants Marvin had given her, a hobby that had become therapy, watching things grow under her care. She was laughing at something Mabel said when her wolf suddenly surged forward with a warning. "Danger. Run." Kristen looked up to see a figure emerge from the tree line, Vivienne looking wild and disheveled, nothing like the elegant Luna she'd once been. Her clothes were torn, her hair tangled, and her eyes carried a manic gleam that made Kristen's blood run cold. "There you are," Vivienne said, her voice sing-song. I've been watching, waiting, learning the patrol patterns. Did you think a banishment would stop me? Did you think I'd just let you steal everything I worked for? Mabel, run, Kristen said quietly. Get the guards. I'm not leaving you. Gio. Mabel ran toward the pack house, screaming for help. Vivienne laughed, pulling a silver knife from her belt. Just you and me now, little mouse, like old times. Kristen backed away slowly, her mind racing. She couldn't outrun Vivienne. The former Luna was a full shifter with speed Kristen couldn't match. Fighting was suicide. Her only chance was keeping distance until guards arrived. You ruined everything, Vivienne continued, advancing. My marriage, my status, my father's respect. Everything I built, destroyed because you couldn't die quietly like you were supposed to. You destroyed yourself. Kristen's voice was steadier than she felt. You confessed, in front of the council. I didn't make you torture me for 5 years. I didn't make you stage a false assault. I didn't make you lose control and tell everyone exactly what you'd done. That was all you. Because you existed. Vivienne lunged, knife flashing. Kristen dodged, barely, feeling the blade graze her arm. Pain flared, but she kept moving, kept the garden furniture between them, buying time. You were supposed to be nothing, a servant invisible beneath notice. Vivienne's control was completely gone now, replaced by pure madness. But he looked at you. My husband, my mate, looked at you like you were something special. So I made sure no one would ever look at you again. Made sure you'd know exactly how worthless you were. I know my worth now. Kristen grabbed a garden rake, using it to keep distance. And it's not measured by your opinion. You spent 5 years trying to break me, Vivienne. But I survived. I'm still here. And you're nothing now. No title, no status, no power, just a bitter woman who destroyed herself with her own cruelty. Vivienne screamed, launching herself forward with supernatural speed. Kristen swung the rake, connected with Vivienne's side, but the former Luna barely flinched. They crashed together, Vivienne's knife seeking flesh, Kristen fighting with everything she had. Then, suddenly, Vivienne was ripped away. Marvin had shifted mid-run, his massive wolf form tackling Vivienne to the ground. Guards poured from the pack house, surrounding them. Oswin appeared at Kristen's side, checking her bleeding arm. I'm okay, Kristen gasped. She didn't, I'm okay. Marvin shifted back to human form, pinning Vivienne with one hand. You violated banishment, crossed into forbidden territory, attacked a pack member. That's 3 death penalty offenses under pack law. Do it, Vivienne screamed. Kill me, at least then I won't have to watch you play house with that worthless. No, Marvin's voice was ice. Death is too quick. Guards, take her to the cells. She'll stand trial for violating banishment. And this time there will be no political maneuvering, no family intervention, just justice. As they dragged Vivienne away, still screaming threats, Marvin turned to Kristen. Are you hurt? Just a scratch. Really, I'm fine. But Marvin had already shifted focus to her bleeding arm, examining it with gentle hands. Helena needs to see this, and we're increasing security protocols. No one gets within a mile of you without full clearance. Marvin, she could have killed you. While I was sitting in my office doing paperwork, she could have. His voice broke. I can't lose you, not after finally finding you. Kristen reached up, touching his face with her uninjured hand. You didn't lose me, I'm right here. And I fought back, did you see that? I actually fought back instead of just enduring. Marvin's expression shifted to something like pride. You were magnificent. I was terrified. You can be both. He carefully lifted her, cradling her against his chest. Come on, let's get you to Helena. As Marvin carried her toward the pack house, Kristen felt her wolf surge with unusual strength. Something was changing inside her, barriers crumbling, connections reforming. The trauma that had blocked her wolf for 12 years was finally, slowly, beginning to heal. Ready, her wolf whispered, almost ready to run. That evening, after Helena had treated and bandaged Kristen's arm, after Vivienne had been secured in the deepest cell with triple guards, Marvin appeared at Kristen's door. May I come in? Yes. He entered, and Kristen immediately saw the tension in his shoulders, the barely controlled fear in his eyes. This alpha who faced down enemy packs without flinching had been terrified for her. I almost lost you today, he said quietly. But you didn't, I'm here. I'm safe. She got through my security, through all my protections. If your wolf hadn't warned you, but she did. Kristen moved closer. Marvin, you can't protect me from everything. Bad things happen. Dangerous people exist. You can minimize risk, but you can't eliminate it completely. I can try, and I appreciate that, but I also need you to trust that I'm not completely helpless. I survived 5 years of torture. I can survive a knife-wielding ex-Luna. She managed a small smile. Though I'd prefer not to make a habit of it. Marvin pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her injured arm. When I saw her with that knife, when I thought I might be too late, you weren't too late. You were exactly on time. Kristen let herself lean into his strength, feeling safe in a way that still felt new and precious. And I fought. For the first time in 5 years, I fought back instead of just enduring. That's growth. That's incredible. Marvin pulled back enough to look at her face. You're incredible. They stood like that for a long moment, something shifting between them. Not quite romance, but deeper than friendship. Trust building brick by careful brick. Understanding growing despite trauma. Connection forming in the spaces where fear used to live. Stay tonight, Kristen asked. On your side of the bed, but nearby? Always. As they settled into their careful arrangement, fully clothed on opposite sides of the bed, close enough to feel safe but respecting boundaries, Kristen felt her wolf stir again. Soon, the wolf promised. Soon we run together. Soon we're whole. Kristen believed her. For the first time in 12 years, she believed healing was actually possible. It would take time. There would be setbacks. But she was finally moving forward, instead of just surviving. That was everything. Vivienne really broke banishment and tried to kill Kristen in broad daylight. The absolute audacity. But did y'all see how Kristen fought back? Used a garden rake like a warrior. That's character development. That's healing in action. If you're proud of how far she's come, hit that subscribe button because the final chapter is going to show you her complete transformation, and I need you there to witness it. This is the epilogue to end all epilogues. Don't miss it. Engagement questions. Should Vivienne get the death penalty or life in prison? When do you think Kristen's wolf will fully wake? 6 months after Vivienne's final attack, Kristen Egan stood at the edge of Blackridge Pack's forest and felt her wolf surge forward with strength she'd forgotten existed. Are you ready? Marvin asked beside her, his eyes reflecting the full moon above. I think so. Kristen's heart pounded with anticipation rather than fear. She's been pushing at the surface for weeks. Tonight feels different. Then let's run. Marvin shifted first, his massive dark wolf emerging in a ripple of power. He waited patiently while Kristen closed her eyes, reaching for the wolf that had hidden inside her for 12 years. Come out, she called. We're safe now. Come run with me. And finally, miraculously, her wolf answered. The shift hurt, muscles and bones unused to transformation struggling to remember their purpose. But it was good pain, healing pain, the kind that came from using atrophied muscles again. When Kristen opened her eyes, she was looking at the world from 4 feet instead of 2. Her wolf was smaller than average, russet-colored with the amber eyes that marked her human form. But she was whole, strong, alive. Marvin's wolf moved close, careful not to crowd, letting her adjust to being in wolf form for the first time in over a decade. Then he took off running, and Kristen followed. They ran through the forest, leaping over streams and dodging between trees. Kristen felt alive in ways she'd forgotten were possible. The wind in her fur, the earth under her paws, the pure joy of movement and freedom and safety. Her wolf sang with happiness, celebrating this moment of wholeness. When they finally stopped at a clearing bathed in moonlight, Marvin shifted back to human. Kristen followed, the transformation easier this time, more natural. You did it, Marvin breathed, pulling her into an embrace. Your wolf came back. She was never really gone. Kristen's voice was thick with emotion. Just hiding, waiting until it was safe to come out. They sat together in the moonlight, and Kristen reflected on everything that had changed in 6 months. Vivienne was in prison, serving life for violating banishment and attempted murder. Marvin had ensured she'd never threaten anyone again. The trial had been quick, the evidence overwhelming, the sentence just. The pack had rallied around Kristen, welcoming her not as a servant but as one of their own. Survivors from other packs had reached out, sharing their own stories, creating a network of support and healing. Kristen had started training as a trauma counselor, using her experience to help others navigate their own recovery. And Marvin had been patient beyond reason, respecting her boundaries while making his feelings clear. He wanted her, yes, but only when she was ready. Only when trauma had healed enough that choosing him felt like choice rather than obligation. "I'm ready," Kristen said quietly. "Ready for what?" "For this, for us, for the mate bond." She turned to face him fully. "I'm not completely healed. I probably never will be completely healed. Trauma doesn't work that way. But I'm healed enough to know what I want. And I want you. Not because biology says we're compatible, but because you've proven yourself worthy of trust. You've shown me what real partnership looks like." Marvin's eyes shone with emotion. "Are you sure? We can take more time." "I'm sure. 6 months ago, I couldn't imagine wanting anyone. Couldn't imagine trusting again. But you've been patient and kind and respectful of every boundary. You've let me heal at my own pace. You've shown me that power can protect instead of harm." Kristen took his hands. "I choose you, Marvin Swindell, not because you're my mate, but because you've earned my trust and my heart." "I choose you too," Marvin said, his voice rough. "Not just as my mate, but as my partner, my equal, the strongest person I've ever known." They kissed under the full moon, and Kristen felt the mate bond snap into place, not as a burden or obligation, but as a celebration. This was what love was supposed to feel like. Chosen, earned, built on mutual respect and trust. 3 months later, they held a mating ceremony that blended tradition with their own unique story. Kristen wore a dress she designed herself, elegant but with hidden strength in its structure, beautiful but armored. Marvin wore the traditional alpha regalia, but he knelt when speaking his vows, making himself equal rather than dominant. "I vow to protect you," he said, his voice carrying through the assembled pack. "But also to trust your strength, to support your dreams, to respect your autonomy, to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. I vow to be your partner, not your owner, your equal, not your alpha, your mate, chosen freely and loved completely." Kristen spoke her own vows with a voice that no longer shook. "I vow to trust you, even when fear whispers doubt. To be honest about my struggles, knowing you'll support rather than judge. To build a future with you based on choice and respect. I vow to be your partner in all things, joy and sorrow, strength and weakness, victory and challenge. I choose you today and every day after." The pack howled their approval, a sound that once would have terrified Kristen, but now represented belonging and acceptance. At the reception, former servants who'd witnessed her suffering came to congratulate her. Mabel cried happy tears. Dr. Helena presented her with her counselor certification. Oswin, now promoted to second beta, gave a speech about courage and justice. Kristen could have stayed silent, he told the assembled pack. Could have accepted her fate, let fear keep her voiceless. Instead, she spoke truth when it was most dangerous. She fought back when it would have been easier to surrender. She survived when everything said she shouldn't. And now, she's using that experience to help others find their own voices. That's not just survival, that's heroism. Later, as the celebration continued, Kristen found herself on the terrace overlooking the pack lands. This was her home now. These were her people. She had a mate who loved her, a purpose that fulfilled her, a future that was hers to shape. Marvin joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "What are you thinking?" "That 6 months ago, I was in a cell waiting to die. And now I'm here, safe, loved, whole. It doesn't seem real." "It's real, all of it. You fought for this life, Kristen. You survived years of torture, found the courage to speak, and built yourself into someone incredible. This happiness. You earned it." Kristen leaned into his embrace, feeling her wolf content, and settled inside her. The trauma would always be part of her story. Scars didn't disappear just because the source was gone. But it was one chapter, not the whole book. She had more chapters to write now. Better chapters. Chapters filled with healing and love and the kind of strength that came from surviving the unsurvivable. "I want to expand the counseling program," she said. "Reach other packs, create more safe houses, train more counselors. There are so many survivors out there who think they're alone, who don't know it's possible to escape. Then we'll do it. Whatever resources you need, whatever support. I'll back you completely. We'll do it together, Kristen corrected. Partners, remember? Partners, Marvin agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. As the moon rose higher and the celebration continued below, Kristen Egan, former servant, torture survivor, blocked shifter, now counselor and Luna of Blackridge Pack, felt something she'd thought lost forever. Hope, not the desperate hope of survival, but the confident hope of someone who knew their own strength, who understood that healing was possible, that justice could be served, that speaking truth mattered even when it was terrifying. She'd been silent for 5 years because silence meant survival, but she'd found her voice again, not just for herself, but for everyone who still suffered in silence, for every survivor who thought they were alone, for every victim who believed no one would listen. She would be proof that speaking up mattered, that justice was possible, that healing could happen, that survivors could not just endure but thrive. Deep inside, her wolf stretched contentedly. Home, she said simply, finally home. And for the first time in 12 years, Kristen completely agreed. She was home, she was safe, she was loved. And she was finally, completely, miraculously free. From tortured servant in a cell to Luna of the Pack, from blocked wolf to running under the full moon, from survival mode to thriving with a mate who actually respects her. That is the character arc we deserve. If this story didn't make you feel all the feelings, anger at Vivienne, pride in Kristen's courage, satisfaction at justice being served, then I don't know what will. Drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Mine is when she fought back with that garden rake. Iconic. And if you believe survivors deserve their happy endings, if you think speaking truth matters even when it's scary, if you know that healing is possible even after the worst trauma, show this video some love. Like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs to know that their voice matters, that they're not alone, that better chapters are possible. Until next time, remember, silence protects abusers, but speaking truth protects survivors. Be someone who listens. Be someone who believes. Be someone who fights for justice. Peace out, story lovers, you're amazing.